Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Parents Against Vaping Ask the Expert today. I'm just going to give it 1 minute. We have a large group of attendees today, I'm thrilled to say. So we'll just give it 1 minute so people can join. Thanks so much. All right, well, you know what, let's get started. We have a full agenda today. Lots of questions came in that I want to make sure we try to get to. But again, welcome. My name is Mimi Boblik. I'm a founding partner and full-time volunteer with Parents Against Vaping. I'm joined behind the scenes, my Wizard of Oz today, is Austin Spence, a colleague of ours who helped to set up the event. So thank you, Austin, for all your help. I'm really excited about today's expert. But before I introduce her, I just want to mention, talk a little bit briefly about PAVE, about Parents Against Vaping. So Parents Against Vaping is a nonprofit. We do advocacy and education around the youth vaping crisis. And really our main mission is to protect youth from the dangers of tobacco use and the predatory behavior of the tobacco and the vaping industries. I'm sure some of you have heard our presentations before, so I won't go into too much detail about who we are, but the origin story was really a crazy one when a Juul representative came into the founder's ninth grade son's classroom to basically tell the ninth grade kids that Juul was totally safe and about to be approved by the FDA, none of which was true back then in 2019, and none of it is still true, not true today. So we work on the federal, state, and local levels to try to get changes to the laws and to educate, which is part of what we're doing today with our series. So I am thrilled to present Julie Ross to you today. Julie Ross is Executive Director of Parenting Horizons, which is an organization devoted to enriching children's lives through parent and teacher education. She holds an MA in psychology from NYU, from New York University, and she's the best-selling author of How to Hug a Porcupine, Negotiating the Prickly Points of the Tween Years, which I can tell you I read, and it was very helpful when my kids were tweeners, as we say. In there, she offers tangible techniques for optimal parenting to tween communication. And as part of her work, Julie facilitates support groups and workshops and is also available for private consultations with parents across the country. And on a personal note, I can just say I've been lucky enough to benefit from Julie's wisdom and guidance for many years. My kids are now in their 20s, but I took her parenting class when my kids were very young. And I've been part of one of her parenting groups for years as well. So I can tell you firsthand that it's been really fantastic to have her guidance and her voice in my head when I get really upset, or when there's a crisis, what I think is a crisis in my family. I hear Julie's voice. And so I know we can't solve everyone's problems today in 1 hour, but we're certainly gonna start to chip away. So let's get to it. We did receive a lot of questions through the pre-registration process, and we're going to try and get to some of those today. We sort of aggregate them. There's many common questions, but we also will be accepting questions through the Q&A button. So please feel free to use that in the bottom of your Zoom window, and we'll try and get to as many questions as we can today. So I want to start with a broad question. We talk about parenting with heart, and I just would love if you could just explain what that means to us.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mimi.
And welcome, Julie.
Thank you. And thank you for that lovely introduction. I appreciate it. And just so our viewing audience knows, I have 2 children of my own. They're 30 years old and 35 years old. So I haven't had experience directly with my children in vaping, but as you can probably imagine, a large part of my practice is how to handle this epidemic that is, has taken over. So parenting with heart is a style of parenting that I developed both as an alternative to and a more effective way of handling teen behavior than what I saw as the kind of primary parenting styles that were out there. So there are many different ways to parent, and some are effective and some are not effective. So I want to run through just a couple of common styles that are not effective, because these are kind of the fallback things that parents fall back to when they don't have an alternative. So parenting with anger is ineffective ultimately. And that means yelling at your children or teens, intimidating them, or threatening them. So parenting with anger bumps right up against the teenagers' need for independence and to be different from the parents. So it's going to get you the opposite reaction of what you're what you're really going for here. Another one is parenting with shame, which means embarrassing or belittling or demeaning your teenagers or tweens or children in general, acting disgusted by their behavior. That's disgusting. Why would you do that? That is ultimately ineffective as well, because remember, they're trying to pull apart from you. They're trying to be different. So if you think it's disgusting, they're going to think it's wonderful. The third one that came to me, and there's probably many more, is parenting with fear. And we parent with fear because we're fearful. I mean, that's just the reality of it, right? We parent with fear because we're fearful. But what that looks like is engaging in hyperbole. And what I mean by that is, if something isn't 100% true 100% of the time, then we have to be careful to not say to our children, this is going to happen to you because everybody who engages in this 100% of the time is going to, become an addict under the bridge. In my day, back in my day, it was the hyperbole was marijuana is a gateway drug, and if you even take one, if you even smoke one part of a joint, you're going to wind up addicted to heroin and all of this kind of stuff. And we now know that that's not true, but certainly kids are able to suss out what's true and what's not true. Now, the reality is with vaping is that the hyperbole isn't really necessarily hyperbole. It really kind of is factual, that it is a highly addictive and very frightening substance because it's hard to get off of. Still, you're going to be better off underreacting, and we'll talk about how to do that later, underreacting and not trying to use fear as a way to get them to quit vaping or not vape. So all of that goes back to, what does parenting with heart mean? Parenting with heart comes out of the knowledge that when children become teenagers, and this was the most frightening thing I heard as a parent, but when children become teenagers, you no longer as the parent have any control over them. Now that's terrifying, because when I heard that myself, I was like, no, come on, But it's true, because control only extends to the length of your arm, to your ability to hold them down in place, put them in a timeout, corral them in a crib or a playpen or whatever. Once they're out and about in the world and they're independent, they're moving around independently, you don't know what they're doing. And you can't control that. Now, that can feel very disheartening to parents, but the reality is that we have something more powerful than that. When we parent with heart, we have influence over them. Influence is far more powerful because it extends outside of the boundaries of the household, outside of your policing of them. So creating that influence means that we have to rely on what I call a relationship-based approach. And what that means is that the lines of the emotional temperature in the house is neutral for the most part. The other parenting styles I talked about are at a minimum. And the lines of communication remain open between parent and child. And we'll get into some logistics a little bit later, but the most effective way that I've seen to parent tweens and teens has to do with working on your relationship first, so that they aren't worried about your reactions, that they know that you will respond to them in respectful and non-judgmental ways. So that's what parenting with heart means.
Thanks, Julie. And I have to say, when I hear all this, I mean, you talk about fear, and I think that when I really boil it down, when I've overreacted to my kids, whether it was with the vaping or anything, it was out of fear. It was fear for them. And so I definitely appreciate that. I think it is very hard to do, easy to say. And what also echoes, which you mentioned, was this idea of underreacting, because underreacting is so tough to do, but also agree that it's effective.
Yeah.
So let's get into a specific vaping question, or question around vaping. And again, what Julie and I were talking about earlier is that the answers to a lot of these questions can actually be applied to other substances, right? So this is really more a discussion about parenting and parenting style and parenting techniques, but we're specifically talking about it with regard to vaping. However, this could probably be applied to other substances as well. But in the case of vaping now, unlike alcohol, I think, or perhaps other substances, but with vaping, we are hearing from teachers especially that kids are starting younger and younger, as young as second, third grade. They might be finding them in their families' homes or on the street somewhere, and they're bringing them on, yellow school buses. And so, I'd love to get your thoughts on what you think about how this conversation, how early it should start, and how it should start.
Mm-hmm. So it's a great question, and here's my answer to it. It should start 3 years ago. 5 years ago, 7 years ago, yesterday. I mean, the reality is that the sooner you start talking about it, the sooner you have the opportunity to instill your values and your knowledge with your children. And a lot of parents make the mistake of thinking, oh, if I don't talk about it, they won't be exposed to it. It won't come up for them. They won't think about it. But that nothing could be further from the truth. Because as you said, Mimi, what we're seeing now is that they are being exposed to it. I mean, some parents are vaping, or aunts and uncles or cousins, or, I don't know about grandparents.
Siblings, yeah.
Siblings. So they are exposed to it. Keeping silent about it only makes us miss a really, really golden opportunity, which is to talk with them about the dangers before they have the hubris that is common for most teenagers. And hubris is that feeling that, I know better than mom and dad. Come on, you can't tell me that. And also this kind of invincibleness. That's not going to happen to me. And that's just part of the developmental period of being an adolescent. So if we can talk to them before adolescence, we have the opportunity to get knowledge in before they're actually exposed or actually maybe doing it. So the answer is as soon as possible. If you haven't started, start today. if you have, if you have started, but you're a little bit confused about how to make that work, we'll get into that a little bit later.
Right. So this question is one that comes in a lot, and I will take a stab at this because we do talk about this in our presentation. And what I will just preface this by saying that, the problem with some of these signs is that they are also signs of typical teenage behavior.
Right.
And sometimes it can be hard to tell the difference between a child who might have a nicotine addiction or is vaping and just someone who's being a normal, irascible teenager. But I will just share some of the highlights here for you. So secretive attitude definitely is one of them. Again, yes, what teenager doesn't shut the door on their parents, but just more sort of unusual behavior that you wouldn't necessarily associate with your own child. So if they're more secretive, if you're out to dinner or on vacation and they're taking more opportunities to leave you, to be where you are not, it could be a sign that they need to get a nicotine hit. They need to go vape. This sweet smell, this is one I missed, frankly, in my own child, because it doesn't smell like cigarettes. It doesn't have that awful smell. It's actually, it takes on the smell of whatever you're vaping. It's an aerosol. So they are breathing in and breathing out aerosol. Aerosol is like, think of hairspray. It sticks to things like hair and your clothes and other objects. So if you smell on your child's clothing or on their hair, this sweet smell or a different smell, it could be a sign of vaping or that they've been around it. Also, this dry mucus, membrane, like the need to drink more, increase in thirst. Looking for obviously unusual items. If you don't know what these look like, go on our website. We have, they keep changing every month, every few weeks. There are new devices. So you really need to know what they look like and just be aware. Some of them look like highlighters. They look like nothing, but they can be weed pens or vapes. Changes in sleeping pattern, because nicotine is a stimulant. It can really mess with a child's sleeping behavior. Also, kids, we have heard of kids hiding their vapes under their pillows at night because they're so addicted. So this could also be affecting a child's sleep if they're using it in the evening or throughout the night.
May I interject real quickly?
Please.
Because I think it should be noted that changing in sleeping patterns is not necessarily a sign of teen vaping. The circadian rhythm, which is the thing that allows us to get sleepy, changes in teenagers drastically. And teenagers literally cannot get sleepy until midnight or 1.
That's good to know. Yeah.
And additionally, we've got, we have, all of the technology and the devices and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But it really is a problem in just across the board that they can't get to sleep. So I want to encourage parents to think about all of these definitely as signs and underreact, because it may not be what you think it is.
Right.
It's a good thing to have the radar up.
Good point. Yeah. And it's, a lot of it is about this dopamine, this chemical in our brain that gets triggered with vaping, with nicotine in particular, and also with electronics. So you're right. Like it could be the electronics are stimulating the brain. So I think it's in totality. If you're seeing a few of these things at once, it might be an opportunity to have a conversation. Another one that I missed was a cough, because I kept thinking it's an allergy or it's something, but because vaping does irritate the lungs and inflame the lungs, it can, you might see either a little raspy cough, a dry cough, or worse, frankly. And if it's worse, it might be time to see a doctor. Could be a cold, it could be unrelated, but again, it's all of these things in totality. And then just a few more. A really big one, which is this change in their behavior in terms of becoming anxious, irritable, moody, We've heard of, kids punching holes in doors because their parents took their vapes away. Again, some of this can be normal teenage behavior. And it could also be a sign that your child is having a withdrawal symptom from not being able to get to their vape, or not being able to vape enough. Changes in eating habits, nicotine does suppress the appetite, but if you notice weight loss, or just a lack of appetite, it could be a sign. And then finally, just being aware of their spending habits, because kids have so many different ways to spend money now, where we have no idea how to trace it. So Venmo and Zelle and Instagram, kids are buying these products a lot on Instagram at schools. This is how they're trading, and so it's just important to be aware of their spending habits.
Yeah.
Okay, so back to a question. We go back to this. What's the best way to start a conversation with the youth you think might be vaping? And does it matter by age, or would this be something you would approach as, not depending on their age in terms of your technique?
I would not attach it to a specific age. I would say that this is the the conversation that we have to have, and but I also want to differentiate between a youth you suspect may be vaping versus a youth that is vaping.
Good point.
Because here's the thing: teenagers are very clever at gaslighting you, at making you think that you don't see and hear what's going on. So you may be wanting to put something in the suspicion category when you actually really know what's going on. So for example, if you go into your child's room, you're cleaning up, you're shutting drawers, you're putting their laundry away or whatever, and you see vape paraphernalia, you no longer suspect, they're vaping. So when you know that they're vaping, you want to make sure that you don't ask questions that you already know the answer to. They're vaping. Don't say, "Are you vaping? I found this. Is it yours?" Now, typically the average teenager is going to go, "Well, no, I'm not vaping. I'm holding it for a friend." And I just love how naive they are, because really, you really think I'm going to buy that? I see this, the next slide is.
Well, that's for this gets to what you're talking about here. So
yeah, this is kind of both don't ask questions you already know the answer to, and then keep it curious. So let's stay on this slide for both what I'm saying now and for the next part. But if you know that your child is vaping, you want to come in and say, I found vaping paraphernalia. I know that you're vaping. And they're still going to say, "No, I didn't. No, I did. I'm not vaping." But at least in that conversation, they know that they can't pull the wool over your eyes. And that becomes important. Now, when you make a statement like that, you want to make sure that you're not being judgmental, that you do not have sarcasm in your voice, that you're not inadvertently shutting communication off. And there's a number of ways that we can do that. Don't you dare vape in my house is what we call commanding, and that blocks communication. And remember what we said at the very beginning, which is that what we want to do is we want to keep the lines of communication open. Open lines of communication are the only way you can get your knowledge and your values across. They're the only way. And they're the only way ultimately to get help for your child if they need help. You've got to have those open lines of communication. So we want to avoid sarcasm is another thing. "Oh, I suppose you're gonna, you think that you can get away with this," and that, we want to make sure that we keep it non-judgmental. So that leads me to whether you know or you suspect, to keep it curious. So I often liken parenting a teenager to being an anthropologist like Jane Goodall. So Jane Goodall went to study, right? I think it was the great apes or gorillas or something, and went to study. And she didn't go in there and go, oh my gosh, why are they throwing poo at each other? What? You know, she didn't judge, she just observed. And she was like, huh, that's interesting behavior. I wonder what that behavior is serving. I wonder why they do this. She leaned in with curiosity, and ultimately the population that she was studying accepted her as part of their, you know, tribe or group or whatever. And that's ultimately the way we have to be with teenagers. We have to lean in with curiosity and not judgmental curiosity, but and if you suspect that your child has been vaping, or if you don't know, or even if they've been exposed, you know, saying, I'm curious about what you've heard about vaping, or like, is that something that is going on amongst your peers? You know, is it something you're tempted to try, or that you've tried? I'm just kind of curious, because this wasn't a thing when I was, you know, your age. And, you know, I'm kind of curious if it's out there. So you notice in my tone, I'm keeping it respectful, because I want to make sure that they don't shut down because they're feeling judged.
Even though on the inside, you're probably screaming, right? You're probably like, oh my God, I can't believe I just found this. Like, this is making me furious, right?
Undoubtedly.
I think you had once said, like, parents have to be Academy Award winning actors. And I think that's a moment here.
Absolutely. I've often said that, you know, if I could have a huge parenting center, we'd teach parenting in one room, we'd teach acting in another room, and we'd teach playing poker in the third room, because you get to know the tell. You know, what's your child's tell that they're doing something wrong? You know, but you know, yeah, you have to be an Academy Award winning actor. You have to, it's really ultimately about underreacting and what we call zippy the lippy. And that doesn't mean, if we zippy the lippy and that we underreact, it doesn't mean that we're going to respond. It means we're pushing a pause button so that we can think, what is the most effective way to communicate my fear, my concern, what I've seen, what I've heard? What's the most effective way to communicate without shutting my kid down? So it's not about not doing anything. Absolutely 100%. It is about doing something. It's about the timing of it. And I've often said parenting is two things. Parenting is technique and parenting is timing. And you have to wait for the best time to present it. It also gives you the opportunity to script yourself, which I think is incredibly helpful. So like the script you're seeing on the screen right now, I'm curious about whether you've heard about it. Script it. Get your feelings under control. Get your emotions under control as a parent. Script this. Practice it with your spouse. Practice it with your best friend. You know, practice it in the mirror with yourself. Practice it to the dog. You know, practice saying it so that it can come across as respectful and calm, so that you don't trigger your kid to lie. You want to go to the next slide, maybe? Because I think the next slide is keep it compassionate. So keeping it compassionate, you know, I think when we become overwhelmed with our own fears as parents, it's hard to see the world from our children's point of view. And it's hard to be compassionate about kind of what they're being exposed to, how hard it is to resist temptation. And this could be technology. This could be vaping, as you said before. This covers like kind of all the difficult stuff that tweens and teens are exposed to and come in contact with. It's really hard for them to feel like they fit in with their peers unless they engage in the same behaviors as the peers, because peers have just an amazing structure that says you're in, you're out. You're in if you're vaping, you're in if you're using alcohol, you're in if you're smoking weed, you're in. If you're not doing those things, you're out. And there's very structured rules. So it's hard. I think what is confusing maybe to parents, well, certainly parents in my generation, is because because there were fewer things that we were exposed to, and we weren't exposed to those things until older than kids are being exposed today. It was a little bit easier to base our peer relationships on interests like, music or theater or sports or that kind of thing. Now that there's this whole new landscape available, I'm compassionate for these kids. I feel like it is so hard for them to resist temptation. And I think we can convey that to them.
Well, they also make it so easy. And I mean, the industry has normalized the behavior dramatically, right? By making it look cool, more than normalizing it. It's making it look very, cool and tempting. And they really went after our kids, which is what I always say, like, our kids were targeted. So, it's really not their fault. I mean, now kids know a little bit more than they did 5-7 years ago, but still we have to understand it's the same with the phones too. I mean, they're led to like be drawn into these things, right? So I see what you're saying with, leading with compassion there.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's the kind of thing that you say to them. Listen, I know that you're going to be exposed to this. And if not now, then eventually. You probably have already been exposed to this.
Yeah.
And I get it. I understand how hard it can be to resist that temptation and to you're probably wanting to experiment. I mean, that's just the normal teenage behavior, is they want to experiment. The problem is that this form of experimentation is far more dangerous than other forms of experimentation that were available in the past.
Mhm.
But I think you say, I understand how hard it is. And, do you have strategies for resisting, or, if you've already kind of fallen into it, I get it. I'm not going to be mad at you. I'm not going to be mad at you. I just want to hear like kind of what your experience is of the world.
So someone is asking a question about, okay, they're vaping now. What's the follow-up question to, after letting them know that, what's a good follow-up question? And maybe, you are getting to it in some of this, maybe this will also help.
Yeah, exactly. Great question. And what is the follow-up question? Well, I know that you're vaping. They're going to deny it. They're going to say they're holding it for a friend. And you're going to say, be that as it may, right? And just accept it. Don't get into the argument. That's a diversion, right? And then we want to use what we call I statements. And if they're denying it and saying it's their friend, we use the I statement about the friend. And if they're admitting to it, which is highly unlikely, then we can use the I statement about them. So I statements are what you see on the screen. I feel followed by a feeling word. So in this case, what would come to mind would be, and you want to avoid the big three things that I said at the beginning. You want to avoid, I feel angry. You want to avoid, I feel terrified. You want to avoid, I feel embarrassed about your behavior. You want to avoid shame, anger, and fear, right? But you can say, you can use feeling words that um, are milder than the category, let's say, of fear. So I feel concerned. Finding this, I feel concerned because based on what I've read, I feel worried that, this is a highly addictive substance. And then we want to listen with heart, which is similar to parenting with heart. We want to listen with heart and say, tell me more. I told you, Mom, it's not mine. I'm holding it for a friend. Okay, well, I feel concerned. I feel concerned for your friend. How are you handling that? Knowing that they are engaging in behavior that's like, troubling. I mean, how are you handling that? How are you supporting them in this? To break free of it. So now you've got a lot in there, right? Which you're really talking to your teenager, as opposed to talking to, the friend, but you're talking through that venue and, just acknowledging. So I statements are, I would call them seeds that we plant. So if your child's already vaping, this is a long series of conversations that you're going to be having. This is not a one-off. They go, oh, thank you so much, Mom or Dad, for intervening. I hadn't realized, and of course I'll quit immediately. This is a long series because if they are vaping regularly, they probably are already addicted. Now, I don't want you to feel, you the parents to feel, to spark, trigger more fear for you. But I think that's just, not putting your head in the sand. Parenting is to understand the realistic aspects of this. So you got to expect that it's not going to be a one-off, that you're going to find more rather than less. And that your goal has to be to keep the lines of communication open so that if or when, and I think most of the time it's when they want to stop, they can come to you and you can be helpful around that.
So I have a follow-up question to this one, which I could absolutely see happening. I mean, in this case, they're saying that, there's not a great age between the parent and the child, but this could happen anywhere, which is the child to just turn it right back on you and say, oh, Mom, I know you tried this stuff when you were my age. Like, I know you did, so don't be all high and mighty or whatever it is. Like, how do you respond to that? Because I'm sure that has come around to parents before, like, well, you smoke, or you vape, so, don't tell me what to do, or, so, maybe you could address that.
Right, exactly. So you're going to find a lot of variety in what experts feel like is the appropriate thing to say if your child confronts you with behavior that you did in the past. So we have some experts are going to say, deny it. I did not do this, blah, blah, blah. That's not my style. I also, on the other end of the spectrum, some parents actually engage in the behavior with their teenager, well, let's all do this together, right? I don't believe in that either, obviously. I'm really kind of a middle of the road person when it comes to this. And by that, what I mean is, yes, I did. And it was a mistake. And I realize now that it wasn't a safe choice that I made. And I realize now that a lot of harm could have come to me. And if you're talking about things like that affect our, our inhibitory behaviors, like, if we're thinking about like drinking and driving, for example, you know, we want to say, I realized that I could have killed somebody. So yes, I did. And it was a mistake. And then, you know, and then, yeah, I mean, that's what I would say about it. If that makes sense.
Well, let's keep going because I know we're running out of time, but and we'll get to some of the. Do you want to talk about the sandwich technique and then some of the questions we've already hit on? But I do want to.
Yeah, let me just briefly talk about the sandwich technique. Anytime that you want to get across a value of yours or a concern of yours to your tween or teen, the best thing is to do what we call make a sandwich out of it. And this was taken from Mary Pfeiffer's work. And the sandwich technique is you say something positive or encouraging. So I know maybe some of you are thinking, my child has done nothing positive. There's nothing positive about the behavior. So you might have to dig a little deep, but think about, like, how are they with their friends? Are they kind? Are they generous? How are they with their schoolwork? Are they good students? Are they responsible? How are they with their siblings? You know, find something that you can say something positive about. And you can say, you know, one thing, I don't think I often tell you this, but one thing I admire about you is how you've, you know, taken responsibility around being the team captain for your, you know, for your soccer team. And, you know, that's, you know, that's admirable, right? Then that's the piece of bread. Now you have to think about this as a high carbohydrate sandwich. So you lay down that piece of bread and then you say, and we're going to be specific to vaping. I feel worried because vaping seems out of character for you in terms of kind of the choices that you've made in the past. That's it. Let it lie. And then you want to say something positive. I want you to know you're not in trouble. And, you know, I do trust you. And I feel as though, you know, you're you know, you've shown the ability for me to have that trust in you. And I trust that you're going to be thoughtful and make safe choices moving forward. Now, even if you don't believe the pieces of bread in the sandwich, right? It's important that you convey trust, that you use encouragement, because that's a more powerful motivator than pointing your finger and saying, I can't believe how irresponsible you're being, you know, you're in trouble, young person. That's not going to motivate them. That's going to shut them down. So what we want to do is we want to dig deep. And again, if you're pressing the pause button, you have an opportunity to craft this. Take your time. It's not a call to 911. It's important if you find vape stuff or any other kind of, you know, drug related stuff. It's important, but it's not a call to 911. You have a day, you have 2 days, you have a couple days to think about how you want to present this to them.
Thank you. So this is something that, I mean, I've tried many times when my kids were younger, again, out of fear, you know, every time I saw an article or every time I saw something that was educating, that I thought would help them, either by, frankly, by scaring them, you know, a double lung transplant, or, you know, someone was in the hospital in, you know, ICU, or just some more information about brain health, how it affects the brain or the lungs, or I would send it to my kids. And, you know, in this case, they're not taking it seriously. In some cases, they get just downright adamant. And so wonder if you can address how we should handle that as a parent.
You know, it's a great question. I think adolescents in particular are programmed to not take anything their parents say seriously. And it's part of the developmental age and stage. It's part of kind of the two driving developmental needs that they have to be independent from you, to think independently from you, and the desire to be different from you. So, you know, you're trying to educate them around it, and they're like, you can't make me. It's like when they were 3, you know, and you say, you know, it's time to go to bed. You're not the boss of me. You can't make me. And that's kind of why they're not going to take you seriously. And so, in addition to trying to open those lines of communication so that they hear you, right? All they really need to do is to hear you. They don't need to show you that they hear you. They don't need to show you that they're taking seriously. You need to trust that if you've said it in, you know, in a curious, compassionate, sandwiched way, that they've heard you. Okay. Now, another thing, however, that you can do is you can, you know, make sure that you alert your pediatrician and have somebody as a higher authority speak to them, right? Alert them, say, you know, and maybe pediatricians are doing this on the regular. I don't know, because it's been a long time since I've needed to use a pediatrician. But, you know, I think sometimes hearing it from a doctor is, you know, helpful, in the form of not the doctor saying, you know, I know you're vaping, your mom told me, but to say, you know, listen, I need to talk to you about vaping because it's a serious health concern for kids your age, and let the doctor present it.
And to build on this question, not so much the expertise question, but the support question, how, if at all, do you bring in third parties, whether it's an uncle or a pastor or a counselor or a teacher, someone who they might be a trusted source for them? Do you find that useful, either instead of you as a parent or on top of or in addition to you as a parent?
I think not in addition to you as a parent, because then the kid is going to feel double teamed. You know, they're going to feel like, you know, the world's against them, and that's going to just make them more resistant and more rebellious. But I think, you know, if they do have a trusted adult in their life, you know, who engages in kind of regular conversations, how you've been, how you doing, with them, I think it's something that they can bring up. Let's say it's an uncle or aunt, and, you know, how you doing, you know, and in the same way that we said on an earlier, you know, in an earlier slide, to say, you know, one of the things I'm hearing about is, like, I'm hearing about vaping, and, like, tell me more about that. Right. So it's great if a trusted source can bring it up with them.
Yeah.
I think the precondition to that is that this has to be, it can't be a blind side. This has to be someone who they've been in regular conversation with, they've talked about feelings with, they've engaged with in kind of conversation before, as opposed to, you know, Uncle Dude calling up and saying, hi, haven't spoken to you in 4 years, but, you know, I'm
So someone they already have a relationship with, maybe a coach, or
yes,
it might be tricky because they might get taken off the team, but someone who they really trust. So I'm going to skip that because we sort of did address that. So what? So this is a parent who is just, you know, frustrated, right? They keep getting caught and they don't know what to do. So, you know.
well, you know, this may go against something you said in a previous slide, Mimi, because you said, there have been stories about kids punching holes in walls because their parents take their vaping stuff away.
It's
So,
more of a withdrawal sign, like that's the agitation that comes with the withdrawal. Yeah, yeah.
right, exactly. So, I mean, listen, I believe in making consequences fit the behavior. So, for example, an example of that not being what I believe in, is if you catch your child vaping, you take away their Xbox.
Right.
There's no relationship, right? I do believe that you can say, you know, I'm not comfortable having this in the house. I can't stop what you do outside the house, but if I find it, I will take it away.
Well, and I also think, I mean, maybe they're getting caught at school as well, which is, you know, unfortunately, many schools are dealing with it through punishment as opposed to through trying to help them. I mean, I think, you know, if a child is getting caught multiple times, they probably have an addiction and probably need help quitting. And so then I guess you have to really try to convince the child or, you know, teen that they have to want to quit, right? This is what I've also learned firsthand is you can't make them quit until they're ready to quit. But how do you manage it until they're ready and come around to see that they're ready to quit? You know, and so you're saying make the punishment fit the crime, if you will, in that make it directly related to vaping. But we don't want them also vaping outside the house either. But you know,
Can't control that again. You know, we're talking about
this is
what can you control and what can you not control? You can control whether vapes are in your house.
Yeah.
You can't do anything about what they do outside the house.
Yeah.
And along those same lines, the other thing I would say is it's so important that as parents, you do not give your children too much money.
Mhm.
It's really important. I mean, I work with a lot of parents who feel like, you know, they are affluent. They should be able to give their kids, you know, whatever, you know, $300 a week, $700 a week.
That's a lot.
That's
But I
a
mean,
lot.
vapes are cheap too, you know, that's the reality. But
They are, but at some point, if you're only giving your child $50 a week or $40 a week, they're cheap, but they're gonna, if you keep taking them away, they're gonna run out of money.
and I think on the quitting, I mean, I think what you know, I might suggest, and again, this is only from listening to addiction psychiatrists and others, and is to understand that they won't quit until they're ready, and just to make it known to them that when they are ready, you are there for them. You will provide any resource you have at your disposal. You will work with them in any way you can to help them quit, and it won't happen until they're ready. So that's kind of
100%, Mimi. Yes, that's an excellent point.
So, all right, I know we're running out of time. So I'm not going to go, this is a lot of people ask about health harms so that, you know, they can talk to their kids, which is obviously understandable. This is also on our website. So all I want to make clear is that we know we don't talk about what adults, health harms to adults, but we know for kids, for developing brains, developing lungs, for their organs, we know that that nicotine and the substances in vapes are harmful to developing body parts. So, and it also causes a lot of other can cause other ancillary issues, weakening immune system, seizures, other things. So I don't want to go too much into this because I do want to stay on questions, but if anyone has questions about health harms, please feel free to talk to us. But just know that, you know, that it is really not good for developing brains and lungs and other parts. So without going too much into it. So well, we did talk about this, about the quitting. So I just want to make sure we get to other things. In terms of quit resources, I do just want to share, there are many out there, and you know, there is no silver bullet. I think what's really important to understand is it can take several to many tries for a youth to stop vaping. It is really hard. This nicotine in these vapes is very addictive. It's very hard to quit. So just to be patient, as Julie says, just to be compassionate and understand that this is really tough. But there are, even though there are no approved nicotine replacement devices for kids, if you see a doctor, see a pediatrician, they can often prescribe these medications off script for a youth, depending on their weight and their age and all of that. Also, just talk to trusted adults and see what's out there. They may not need the nicotine replacement. They may just need some talking, or they may need therapy. Unfortunately, these products are not good for our kids' mental health. Many kids are self-medicating for underlying disorders like anxiety, depression, mental health issues. COVID really knocked our kids out in terms of that, and there was a real rise in unfortunately in mental health issues among our youth. And therefore, vaping was a very natural sort of self-medication, even though what they didn't understand, and many kids don't understand, is that these products can actually exacerbate underlying issues like anxiety and depression. So just to know that, but there are resources out there. Just want to make sure, there was a question about younger kids, as early as 8. So, I mean, based on all this, the talking, the recommendations are still the same, would you say, in terms of how to talk to kids?
Yeah, maybe for sure. I think actually on the plus side, if it's a younger kid, you have it's going to be easier actually to kind of talk to them, because you're not bumping up against the natural developmental drives that occur with
Yes.
teens. You still have to keep in mind, all of what we've said. Don't parent with fear, don't parent with shame, don't parent with anger, really be relationship based. You might have more of an opportunity with a child as young as 8 to communicate the dangers yourself, right? Without having to rely on a pediatrician or whatever. 8-year-olds.
Another great question with regard to this 8-year-old, let's just say a young person, if they're getting vapes from their older siblings. This came in. It's a great question, because it may not be an older sibling, but it could be. It could be a family member. It could be, they could find it. So what do you do in terms of, how do you deal with the older child in that regard?
Well, I think, I think similar to if it was just the older child, you're going to want to take the vapes away. That won't, as you pointed out, Mimi, that's not going to forestall them getting more vapes, potentially passing them on. I think I would, if it were me and my children, I would have a family meeting. I would sit down with all of them. I would say, to the youngest one, I know that you're vaping. I know that to the older one, I know that you're giving vapes to your younger sibling. I feel concerned about that. And we need to talk as a family about how we can rectify this situation. How, let's problem solve around this, because it's not appropriate.
Great. Yeah. Family meetings, boy, I know they're so important.
So important. Yeah.
Okay. So, I mean, that is the end of our questions. I have a couple of things to say and to share before we end. But first of all, Julie, thank you. As I know we were never going to get to everything, only scratching the surface, but I hope this gave listeners some idea of how to start the conversations. We invite you to first of all, of course, we always need your donations. So we do these events hoping that people will be educated and learn something. Really, that is our main goal. And we can't do it without support of great people like you. So please donate if you can. Go on the QR code if you wouldn't mind answering a few questions about how we did today, and if there's anything else you'd like to know about. And also, I will tell you, we have a Facebook support group with over 600 members right now. It is a fantastic, beautiful community of concerned parents and others who are trying to, again, in a shared way, share resources, and also just a sense of community around this issue that everyone is struggling with. And then for Julie, you can contact her by heading to parentinghorizons.com. Also, please feel free to use the QR code or use the link which has been provided in the chat by Austin. Thank you, Austin. She also hosts Parenting Horizons podcast, which is really amazing and sort of short and sweet nuggets, available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen. So just want to thank you all very much for joining us today. Thank you so much, Julie. Again, there's so much to learn, and I've been with you for years, and I still feel like I become a better parent, you know, with every hard experience that I go through, of course, as a parent, but also with your wisdom. So thank you so much for being here today, and thank you all for joining us. And take care. I will stop sharing. All right, have a good day, everybody.